Mayor R.T. Ryback.
Here.
Mr. Bill George.
Here.
Councilmember Ed Ruska.
Here.
And I believe that our colleagues Susan Ronnie and Jim Campbell are unable to join us today, but we have a quorum of 6. With that, the next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes. Is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Oh, I forgot. See? Mr. Ruska, you're not here to keep me on track. I have an unerring tendency to jump around on the agenda. So let me go back to agenda item, the next item on the agenda, which is to approve the agenda. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
That agenda is approved. And now we will move to approval of the minutes for September 24th, 2015. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion of the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
That motion carries. The next item on our agenda is the public comment period. Is there anybody in the audience that would like to address the board today? Welcome.
My name is Barry Skolnick. I wanted to mention that I know the board has been concerned about heritage preservation and about it's in the plan for the DMC to try to preserve the downtown area. The HPC has just approved, the Heritage Preservation Commission of the city has just approved to go to the council a ordinance. My problem with the ordinance, and it's a really, I think, a big problem, is that right now the council has the ability to review basically any properties that were on the Stark list, which was a list of a lot of historic properties downtown. Under the ordinance, an owner now can opt out of any demolition review, and I consider that to be a very serious problem, which is going to, I think, really ruin the downtown. And I'm just very concerned. I know the board should be concerned about taking away the provision that the council currently has to review. The owner can opt out of any review of historical properties that are proposed for demolition. I consider that a big concern and hope that the board will consider that a big concern as well. Thank you. Because again, it's taking away power from the council that it currently has to review demolition permits of historic properties. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll just note, colleagues, that this conversation about historic preservation, I believe, is on our agenda, this board's agenda for November. Is that correct? Oh, pardon me, it's in January. Okay, so it is on our agenda. Are there any other public comments? Welcome.
Because I always do. I'm Nancy Slocum, 621 Fifth Avenue. I don't know if you do that or not. I just wanted to echo what Barry had to say and say that I'm really concerned because there are a number of things about historic preservation that are going away that we have currently. I think it's important that we have commission and council review of going forward of buildings that are to be added to the list, to buildings that are to be taken down, of course, and you know, all of the other aspects of this. Currently, it's mostly in the hands of the commission, and I will be negotiating some changes. But that we had a hearing yesterday that there were 2 groups that had things to say and things they wanted to add. We were given the ordinance on Thursday. The hearing was on Tuesday, and we stood up and spoke. And so they weren't interested in anything we had to say, and they didn't make any changes. And so now my understanding is that what we have to bring forward doesn't come forward until the public hearing of the council. You know, in between, there's a COW meeting where they'll be discussing it. I just think that's way too late. I suspect there could be the same kinds of things, that they'll see what they see and they could easily just approve it. And I would hope that there's some way to keep it from being approved before you folks get a chance to weigh in, if there's any way to do it. Because I think that I hear from you the spirit of heritage preservation, and I hear from the Heritage Preservation Ordinance the spirit of owner rights and money in exchange for heritage preservation. To me, a building, if it is old and if it has a history and if it meets all those criteria, it alone has its intrinsic value. And I'm just hoping that somehow that's going to be maintained. That's all. Thanks.
Thank you. Welcome, council member.
Good morning, everyone. Here, I want to talk to you a little bit, real brief, about progress and process with the DMC. And I was quoted in a couple large publications talking about, the lack of visible progress in private investment. The part that they left out in those interviews was the fact that I also said I'm very optimistic that it's coming. But I just wanted to get that out there because that certainly changes the tone of how that was conveyed. And I do believe that there's a lot coming, but the reality is what we've seen publicly is essentially public dollars going towards projects and private projects that were kind of already in the works pre-DMC. We haven't seen that big exciting announcement that Bill's going to make sure we get to make sure that we see some new cranes in the sky and some buildings that would not have happened but for DMC. The progress is not just in terms of the private investment coming into this community, it's also about the processes and the rules that we're setting up for development. We came very close, and I have to tip my hat to DMC staff because they were very involved and they were working hard behind the scenes to make sure we didn't end up with a surface parking lot and a bunch of wraparound drive-thrus on our riverfront. That's not what DMC is about, but we still have additional risks very similar to this that are out there today. There is nothing preventing developers from tearing down properties and putting in surface parking lots to stay for years. If we're doing this thing right, if we're following the process and we're trying to put programs in place to implement the DMC vision, we're not going to see another surface parking lot coming in, taking away a property. If this happens, and there are plenty of people that are willing to do this in the community, of course I'll be back in front of this board saying, what are we trying to do as a community here? At this point, as somebody who represents the taxpayers in the community, it can be very challenging because we see significant dollars going out for consultants. And we just don't have the increase in property base yet to cover those incremental costs that we're seeing. So it is a challenge, and that's why I focus very hard on this process and want to see that going. The second item regarding the process is just that there's a lot of concern in the community regarding how proposals are getting to the DMC board. And I thought perhaps I was maybe alone on being uncomfortable with the way the stadium proposal came forward at the Civic Center. But I appreciate one of your fellow board members, Mayor Brady, also sending out an email that hit on some of the same concerns that I had. This is a project in the order of $75 million, but probably at least half of which would be public dollars, that came to the council with no funding mechanism and a request to start working on it in 19 days. That really concerns me, and when I say that I'm concerned about backroom dealings and things going on behind the scenes, when that comes forward to a government body like that, and it's coming from an entity that is funded by taxpayer dollars, that's a real concern. Now, I take no position whether or not this is a great choice for the community or not, but I say that we have a number of tremendous challenges out there in terms of funding the infrastructure that we already have and making needed investments in other areas. And basically go as simple as a library that's tremendously over capacity right now. How we spend these public dollars are critically important. And we actually, and I would encourage you to go back to our planning exercises, because we actually had an activity in our planning exercises where citizens had an opportunity to evaluate what their priorities were, and one of those things on there was to sink a large amount of public dollars into a stadium. And the interesting thing about that is, in those activities, top to bottom, the public overwhelmingly rejected the notion that this is the best use of our dollars. And I kind of understand where they're coming from, because there are a lot of unmet needs out there. I commend you on bringing the affordable housing conversation up today. It's something that's one of those needs that are critically important to the community. And anyone that's going to make a claim that a stadium is going to give us a huge return on investment, I would argue that the 10-to-1 investment in private dollars that we get when we create affordable housing and the additional returns are just as sizable and important of an investment as a hockey stadium would be. So as we go forward, I would just encourage you to understand that those $600 million in public dollars for the DMC are precious, and we need to figure out how to get the best return we can. But more so than that, we got to make sure that when projects come before us, there's actually good, independent public vetting. We need to make sure that conflicts of interest are specifically addressed in these discussions, and we need to make sure that some of the things that the DMC board committed to, in particular, the fact that consultants for the DMC project, Hamas, would not necessarily be the beneficiary of projects coming forward within the DMC. These are all conflicts of interest that we're well aware of, and from the city's standpoint, we have an ethics commission that can review these types of complaints, but from the DMC, I would encourage you to partner either with our independent ethics commission or the Mayo Clinic, who has a number of world-renowned ethicists as well, to make sure that the decisions making are truly becoming with an appropriate public process. I thank you for your service to community and wish you all the best of luck as you make these decisions.
Yeah, Mayor.
Councilmember? And Madam Chair, just a quick question. You raised a lot of important issues in there, but one piece of it, just because you're a sitting council member and we're a sitting body, in a nutshell, and I think it's an ongoing discussion, what is your perspective on which of these issues, as you hear about historic preservation, stadiums? None of that, by the way, came to this board. I'm not, don't know anything about that, frankly. Could you just tell us where does when a drive-through comes up on all of that? It's a city planning issue. What do you see as the role here between where we should be? Are you bringing this forward to inform us, or do you feel we should have a role in that?
I think the information is critically important, and ultimately my issues as a representative are different maybe than my issues as an individual, and I'm trying to represent what the community is saying. I know the historic preservation is critically important to a lot of my constituents. Right. It's important to me as well, and we want to make sure we have a good process. I think what's unique about this is the amount of money that public dollars are going into planning. We need to make sure the outcomes of those planning are actually achieving the goals that we're setting forward. And when we're in a situation where you could end up with 4 lanes of drive-through and a surface parking lot on the river, that's a failure. And same thing if we have surface parking lots popping up in all the core neighborhoods as a land preservation policy or as long-term parking, that's a failure as well. And I think my emphasis at this point is you have the control of a lot of these planning dollars in the downtown. We can't come out of that with a wish list. We need to actually come out of this with policies that actually protect the public vision for DMC. We need to make sure that we protect taxpayer expenditures, and we certainly need to make sure that we're cognizant of any possible conflicts of interest and address those head on.
Thank you very much. Are there an additional? Please, welcome.
Hi.
Good morning.
My name is Ivan Eitzel. I'm here on behalf of myself and the Rochester Earthfest Volunteer Committee to express our support for the Mayor's 100% renewable energy by 2031 proclamation. I have a copy of the proclamation and a booklet on how to achieve 100% renewable energy for each of you. I am also providing the same documents to members of the Energy Commission, the RPU Board, the City Council, and the County Commission. I have a quote from a booklet being developed by the Rocky Mountain Institute, who is a leader in sustainable community development. Communities are increasingly at the forefront of the energy transition. Citizens are increasingly asking that their cities develop and act on ambitious plans, and community leaders are increasingly seeing the social, political, and economic benefits of doing so. In addition to the significant potential to capture and locally reinvest substantial sums of energy dollars traditionally exported elsewhere, a community transition to clean energy can help address climate change and diversify energy portfolios away from fossil fuels." Unquote. The Mayor's proclamation resolves that Rochester should apply for funding to develop a comprehensive energy plan that includes all 3 sectors: electric, transport, and heating cooling. This plan should be done by a consulting firm with a proven record and experience in developing 100% renewable energy plans. The hope would be that this could be accomplished with state, federal, and/or private funding. The Rochester Energy Commission is already preparing an energy action plan, which is commendable, but the effort lacks the funding, depth, scope, and expertise required for a comprehensive 100% renewable energy plan. Without a robust plan, there will be missed opportunities and unnecessary infrastructure development. Once funding is identified, I personally would like to see the Rocky Mountain Institute work with the current consultant, Wenck Associates, in an expanded role that would completely cover the scope of the proclamation. The Rochester Earthfest celebration is a week-long celebration of Earth Day. We bring all of the different activities associated with Earth Day and promote them together. The week is capped off with a one-day expo being held April 24th next year here at the Mayo Civic Center. Our inaugural expo last year featured keynote speaker Paul Douglas, who drew 250 people for his talk and a standing ovation. The 2016 expo is adopting the 100% renewable energy by 2031 theme and will include keynote speakers, educational classes, displays, products, resources, and vendors that support this initiative. The event is free and open to the public. A lot of the funding for EarthFest last year came from our volunteers, but we are hoping to find more sponsors this year. Mayo has agreed to be a sponsor for the second year, and I have a request into the DMC EDA for a sponsorship. We would really appreciate if DMC could become a major sponsor for the event and help us promote a more sustainable future. I applaud Mayor Brady's effort to take a bold step toward a cleaner future for our children and for all future generations. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I can just make a brief comment. I see we do have a report later on the role that this DMC corporate board is taking and having the funding from the McKnight Foundation to do some things. It's a bold goal, there's no question about it. But as I said, it's unless you have a target, you know you're never going to get there. And so it'll be a challenge, but it is amazing the number of things that have happened, not just since that, but even before, of how we are becoming, and it's just an awareness of how we can become more energy efficient without having to be, going back to, wood stoves and things like that in our rooms. So yeah, it's. I didn't do it naively, thinking that, oh yeah, we can do that just by the end of, we have a contract with our RPU that goes until 2030 where we've got to buy a certain amount of fuel from SIMPA. But it's a challenge and, we might make it. We might make it.
Mayor Ryback?
You knew I was going to comment, or what?
I could see.
Yes, good. Mayor, thank you for taking leadership on this, and thanks for the testimony on it. One of the things that I think is important about this is that there's actually a goal. And what is, I think, a request I have is that as the city sets targets, that give us a perspective on that, on how we can help reach that ability. There are two outcomes. One could be, gee, we did a lot of nice things to make this place more energy efficient. There's a lot more to say, hold up a big dashboard and be able to watch indicators and say that to do that, the public investment that we make needs to be able to X, Y, and Z. And I think that's what I'm looking for out of the McKnight work. That's why I think holding up a goal like this, if we don't think we can hit it, let's not have it. If we think it's an extraordinary effort that we can do, but we can get there, frankly, I think we should do that. That's just, one person talking. But let's put some numbers and some data and metrics and hold ourselves accountable, the city and the DMC, and let's reach, because it's important to do that.
Good. Thank you.
Thank you. Could I just do a quick survey of the audience? I'm wondering how many people are interested in public comment. Just a quick raise. We have one more? All right. Thank you very much. Please come forward. No, it's fine. Just want to make sure.
Thank you.
Madam Chair. board
Welcome.
members. My name is Richard Olin, Shoreview, Minnesota. On this beautiful 44-degree day in Rochester, I was thinking how wonderful it might be if we could all come down from the cities and park in a remote parking lot. And without going get outside, getting on an elevated transit system, avoid 10 stoplights to get to the Civic Center, and again, not go outside to come in here. I want to continue to cast the vision that an elevated transit system for Rochester and the DMC is the right direction to go. And with regard to that, after the last meeting we had, I met with Richard Fries and Tony Knauer, who are kind of the point people for the city for working on this. And I think the outcome of that mainly is their concern about who's going to pay for it. How much does it cost? I visited Schwager Davis on 928 in San Jose, California, and they're the company that built the People Mover in Indianapolis. And they are very interested in having some input into the decisions that are made here and be willing to come and meet with either this board or the people in the city that are working on the transit section. They operate the elevated system in Indianapolis that connects 3 hospitals. It's been operating for 10 years, no cost to the riders. It's funded by the city and the hospitals, and they have had no accidents in 10 years. About 10 days ago, I was in Panama City, Florida, visiting my wife's relatives, and since it was only a 280-mile drive over to Jacksonville, I decided to go over there and see their elevated system. And Nancy and I rode that, and we're very impressed, again, that it's offered free to the riders. It unfortunately doesn't connect to the Mayo Clinic. We went there too, but that's 14 miles to the east, and so public transit is not available to the Mayo there. A couple of final comments. In the Atlanta airport, when we were coming back, we left our rental car off and we took a train that took us 5 minutes to get to the ticket counter, and we took another train to get to the gate. And since our gate was at the end of Concourse E, we walked another 650 yards through the terminal, which seemed like not very passenger friendly. I'd like to see the system that is installed at the DMC be much more friendly to the riders. And my final question is, how does the city, the DMC, zip rail developers, and the developers of property within the DMC environment communicate with each other? And how does that get coordinated so that we're not building buildings over the place where we might be doing transit? Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. With that, I think we will close our public comment period, and I will move to the next item on our agenda, which is the chair's report. I really want to, well, first of all, I would like to just take this opportunity to welcome everybody in the audience who is here. You are an intrepid group of citizens who come all the time to be a part of this process, for which we're very grateful. I'd also like to welcome the city council members that are here and the county commissioners that are here. We're going to have an interesting meeting today as we talk both about affordable housing and about the kind of patient and visitor experience and how that influences the plans and the strategies and the implementation that we're working on. One thing I want to just note is that at our last board meeting, when we approved our operating budgets for 2016, we talked a lot about the sense of urgency that we are all bringing to this, and we also talked about, I sort of talked about how next year is a year of marketing metrics and momentum. And I think that as I think about the work before us, I want to also draw everyone's attention to the 3 big priorities that we have, as a group, identified. Transportation, which I know we're going to be hearing some about from the city today, the work towards moving Discovery Square forward, and I expect that that's very much on the minds of both Mayo Clinic and the EDA. And then the third place that we have said we want to put particular attention right away is heart of the city. And we're excited to see what's happening with, I'm really excited to see what's happening with the Chateau Theater, but I think that there have also been some conversations about what we can start doing right now, our board, as we think about the public spaces around heart of the city. And I wanted to just share with you that we've been having some conversations about the idea of doing a doing an RFP focused on those public spaces, which is where our public resources would be engaged. And Mayor Ryback and I have been talking about it a little bit. I wanted to just turn over this at this point to RT to just talk a little bit about what the thinking is.
Great. There are, the Peace Plaza, I think, is one of the best public spaces in the state right now, but it needs to be one of the best public spaces in the world for this to be a global destination. And it is also exciting that there's a lot of development interest around all of that. But I think as we go into that discussion, we should keep very, very clear on the fact that part of our role is to protect the role of the public realm and use it as the inspirational place. And so there's really a two-track strategy, what gets built around it, but I believe most important, what is the public space? And I think that's a direct role of this entity. And so what we really wanted to do is to begin to understand how can we move forward the vision that began in our overview, but now move it into construction. I think we should begin to set some deadlines about when we make a decision about what will that look like and when will it get built and how will we move that forward and how do we have that be a place that people from around the world come to Rochester and they have nothing they need to talk to about the clinic, but they want to see this great space. So this is a very, very important opportunity for us to look at how we deal with the climate issue, how we deal with the connecting skyways, tunnels, and street, a whole bunch of exciting issues. But more than anything else, this is the place that really stands up and says every single person in Rochester belongs in the heart of the city, and every single person in the country wants to come here.
So colleagues, we have been discussing this with the EDA, and there's no action on this at all today, but I just wanted to I wanted to raise this topic with all of you, welcome any discussion that you have on it. We would think, though, that in November, we might bring forward to you a more fleshed out suggestion for how we could go forward with an RFP on this topic that the EDA would bring forward to us.
Well,
Mr. George.
I certainly applaud that move. I think we had a very interesting and good conceptual vision presented by our consultants. I liked it very much. It did, I think, meet many of the objectives you're talking about. The question now I think you're addressing is how do we take that into reality and make something happen? I think the potential is there. I think it would have the support of Mayo Clinic, would have the support certainly of the mayor, because just making that space special, you can't make every place special, but if that place were really special, and we went ahead with the idea of having a crossroads there, which was for pedestrians, was walkable like Peace Plaza is, and it had, it had places, a hotel, and it would have hotels, and it would have attractive restaurants and other places go, as well as the arts and entertainment. It could be very, very interesting, I think. And it gets to the idea of making this a destination center for health, and when people would see this as a place they want to come.
Thank you. Great. Any other comments on this?
Madam Chair, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
could I just do
you're
a
right.
quick thing? I should have mentioned also, we have a very inspirational plan. Those are conceptual ideas.
Right.
So I think we should send a very clear signal that the idea isn't to implement what is in that paper, but to get design professionals to lead us through a conversation about what we can do. So I found that very inspirational, but I don't take it as a blueprint. I take it as an inspiration.
Great. Yeah, Mayor Brady.
Well, thanks for your comments, but it's probably obvious I'm fully supportive of that. I think this is, it's exciting. And of course, the chateau, I keep saying that's the gem that's right in the middle there. So whatever we do, I want it to be exciting, but I don't want it to detract from the chateau either, that it should enhance that building. And I think we'll get that done. It's, but we've got a lot of people here that have got great visions, and we'll be able to get it. It'll be good.
Great.
We'll have a little report, I think, later on the chateau, too, where we're at right now.
Great. Well, thank you very much. I just wanted to put that get that teed up a little bit for next month. The next item on our agenda is the DMCC 2015 budget to date, and I'll just turn to Mr. Beer. We don't have an action on this. I just will see if you have any comments on the budget to date.
No, our assistant treasurer is out ill today. If you turn to your tab in your book, you can see that we've spent 81% of the, or we have 81% of the remaining budget for 2015. Of that, the third-party subtotal from the EDA, we've got 45% remaining, for a total of 56% of the budget remaining. We're on track with everything. Some are high, some are low. It's kind of an overview. The second page has some of the backup. I'll entertain any questions. It's pretty self-explanatory.
Any questions? All right, seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. The next item on our agenda is the DMCC Form 990. And welcome, Mr. Poppenhagen.
Thank you very much.
Poppenhagen. I always hate to mispronounce
Hagen.
names. Pardon me for that. Poppenhagen.
I answer to anything.
Colleagues, you have in your board packet the 990, and we've asked Mr. Poppenhagen to give us just a very brief overview. I'm sure you've all had an opportunity to take a look at it, and we wanted to just make him available for questions if you had any questions. But if you'd like to just say a few words of introduction, that would be welcome.
All right, very good. Thank you very much. I'm Craig Copenhagen. I'm the principal overseeing the DMCC's audit and tax preparation services. The tax return that is in front of you today is a required filing for all nonprofit entities. It's kind of exciting. In a way, I got to be part of an initial filing of a 990, so this is the first and ever for this organization. Other than that, that's about the most exciting thing that I can get out of a tax return myself. But the other thing that you will notice is that it's stamped draft. And a couple reasons for that. One, it is a public-facing document. So we want to make sure you're comfortable with it. The other thing is it's a best practice for boards of directors to review the Form 990 before it is formally submitted to the IRS. And it gives you an opportunity to see the content, offer input on any of the wording that you see in there, and an opportunity for us then to make some revisions before the final submission. So I'll point out a couple things, just kind of high points. By and large, a Form 990 really it's an informational filing. So it's as much about policies and oversight and governance and mission as it is about numbers. And it really is an opportunity, another opportunity for you to kind of tell your story. So I guess first and foremost, the numbers part is, the numbers do reconcile back to the audited financial statements. Parts 1, 11, and Schedule D in particular. Part 3 is a place for you to talk about your mission, explain your mission. I know we've conversed with legal counsel in the last couple of days on this as well. So this is one area that will make some suggested changes to make the description of the mission and purpose more consistent with your published website and what have you. Talks about the nature of any business transactions. There's a section in Part 6 that talks about governance and policies. And this is an area where the IRS in particular does pay attention to. So what kind of policies and procedures do you have in place to govern the organization? And this is an area too where we get to check the box. Yes, as board members, you did get a chance to review the draft of the document before it was finally submitted to the IRS. So those are kind of some areas that are important to the IRS, can also be important to funding agencies, constituents who are interested in your project and your mission. We have to list out the board, voting members of the board. So you'll notice you're all listed in Part 7. Part 12, an important kind of oversight and governance aspect is that you did obtain an audit. So in that particular section, it asks, did you obtain a compilation of financial statements, which is no assurance? Did you obtain a review of financial statements, which is limited assurance? Or did you obtain an audit, which is positive assurance that you had an outside firm come in, audit the financial statements, and issue an opinion? So which we did some months ago. Schedules A and B provide more detail on the sources of your funding. So again, we're talking about fiscal year 2014 in this case, so the single source of funding was through the City of Rochester at that time. Schedule O is a place to expand on any explanations anywhere in that Form 990 return. And what you'll notice in the early sections of the 990, any places that you have available for comment are about 3 lines long, and doesn't give you a lot of opportunity to tell your story. So hence Schedule O for any additional information, explanation, and clarification. And we have to list out related parties, and in this case, we did list the DMC EDA, and because it's of the relationship as a supporting and supported organization, that's the relationship between DMCC and DMC EDA in the eyes of the IRS. We also included an annual report form to be submitted to the state of Minnesota, and what this will do is put DMCC formally on record as a soliciting organization, which right now you haven't solicited, been outside soliciting public funds, but it is kind of it's a precaution in a way that if anything did come up as being characterized as soliciting public funds or contributions, you're on file already with the state of Minnesota. It's a $25 filing fee, and it's pretty cheap insurance in my mind. So with that, there's also, as a tax exempt organization, there is no income tax due or payable. And that's what I have for you.
Thank you.
So.
Are there questions for Mr. Poppenhagen? Yes, Mr. Beer?
Tina, as your treasurer, I've been in contact with Craig and Kathleen. We have had several conversations, phone conversations and meetings, trying to get this tied up. If you have any questions, I'd ask you that you direct them to myself or Kathleen or Craig, just so that we can get that cleaned up. It's exciting in an accountant type of way, maybe not exciting to everybody else, but it is fairly exciting. So with that, I'd like to move to authorize either yourself, the chair, or myself, the treasurer, to authorize any final revisions that are necessary and then be able to execute that document.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? Mr.
I just think it's good to have Mr.
Ruska.
Beer in this position. If we have issues and concerns, questions, we have a point person that's can be responsive to us if we have any additional questions. So I'm fully supportive.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Jim. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to invite Center for Energy and the Environment to come up. They have just a brief update for us today on their progress on their work for us.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thanks to the McKnight Foundation.
And members of the board, I'm Mike Bull. I'm the Policy Director at the Center for Energy and Environment. We didn't want to take up a lot of time this morning. Wanted to give you a brief update on where we are with our project, which you'll recall is focused on how best to help meet your climate and energy goals with regard to heating, cooling, lighting within 2 areas of the Destination Medical Center, heart of the city, and Discovery Square. Our project, as has been mentioned, is funded by the support of the McKnight Foundation, and we greatly appreciate their confidence. When we last spoke to you back in August, we were planning to provide you with our findings and recommendations at today's board meeting. We're just about ready to do that, but we decided it'd be best, there are a handful of conversations, additional conversations we'd like to have with folks in the city. And we also wanted to give an overview of our project to the Rochester Energy Commission, which has been mentioned this morning, which is a 9-member, citizen member board within the city of Rochester with members appointed by the mayor, and they're doing a local energy planning project. So we thought it'd be good to present to them, coordinate with them, get some input from them, and see how that might shape what we end up telling you on the 19th. I'll promise you that on the 19th you'll get the A-team. You won't have to settle for the likes of me. But we have had some really great conversations. When we first came to talk with you, We didn't know Rochester very well. Mayor Rybeck knows Center for Energy Environment very well. But we're not from here. And so we wanted to come and spend a lot of time listening to folks. And people have been very generous with their time and their knowledge. This is a list of the 30 or so people that we've talked with to date, many of them more than once. I'd especially like to thank Lisa Clark, Gary Newman, Wally Schlink, Roy Lenton, and Brett Gordon. We've spent a lot of time with them to learn more about the energy systems down here. And we hope to build on their good work. Heading into the last couple of weeks of our project, here's where I think we're headed. You have set a pretty high bar for yourselves with a starting point for your climate and energy visions. For climate, your vision is to try to achieve climate neutrality across the destination medical center, which is a significant way toward the goal that Mayor Brady has set in his proclamation. For climate, your starting point is to try, for energy, your starting point is to try to implement the most progressive, responsive, and resilient district energy system in the country. Now, the folks that are responsible for planning for, investing in, implementing energy services in Rochester are doing a really good job. That's the Mayo Clinic, Rochester Public Utilities, the gas company, Minnesota Energy Resources, and the city itself. But achieving those climate and energy visions that you've set for yourselves will take focused, integrated, and sustained attention by the DMCC and the energy implementers here in Rochester. We think we'll have in our opinion, we'll have a set of cost-effective, pragmatic recommendations that will, with regard to energy efficiency, district energy, and renewable energy, that will take you a far distance toward meeting the visions you've set for yourselves. But it'll really take some sustained good work over a long period of time at tracking and being transparent about how the progress that you're making toward those visions. I think that will be key. And we think that progress toward those climate and energy, those sustainability visions, will also enhance the DMC brand and help you with your other goals for the DMCC. So that's all I had for you this morning, and we'll be back on the 19th with some actual information.
Thank you very much. Mayor Ryback?
Could I go to the word integrated, which I think is a great word. And I think this community has a better opportunity to do that because you have one enormous player in it. You have now a mayor coming out with a very bold statement on that. You have a lot of things, but you also have our body. What's important about this is that this is not a permanent body. This is one that's coming in temporarily to play a role to integrate work across sectors. The reason I raise this is that you can give us a report saying here are a bunch of nice things to do. You could also give us a report that holds each of us accountable for what we need to do to be able to reach that. And let's start with this body. I believe you should give us direction on what opportunities and requirements do we have if we're going to hit that goal. That, for instance, should all the dollars we use in any sort of private investment be required to hit X percentage of Y? I don't know how to fill in those blanks yet. Are there issues where if this public entity and that private entity work together in a certain way, something would happen? What I don't want to happen is for us to have a great report and then a couple of years later, people to kind of confide to each other, you know, we couldn't get so-and-so and so-and-so, who are all sitting at a table doing nice things, but we couldn't get them to do this together. We actually, this body has leverage. And it has leverage with the public dollars it uses, and we should use the leverage to take like-minded people who want to work together, but help create the bridge that makes that possible to disrupt the status quo. because we're not going to get this unless we disrupt some of the status quo in a wonderful, friendly Minnesota Rochester kind of way, okay? But your job here is to give us bold ideas, then hop on 52 and get out of town before you're lynched, okay? Our job is to try to help make that happen, but I don't think we will be advanced, nor do I think McKnight gave you money to be timid. And so if we're seeing that kind of plan, that's not a timid plan from the mayor, and we're not going to be able to reach it if we have a nice report that isn't really holding us all accountable. So I'm looking for, as you heard earlier, metrics, responsibility, accountability, and on a shared vision I think all of us are articulating. We just are going to need to do things a little differently to get there, right?
Madam Chair, Mayor Rybeck, absolutely, and I think that that'll be at the core of what we provide you. Besides we'll also have a recommendation around the process for achieving that integration. How these energy implementers, as we refer to them in the report, must work together and plan together. To achieve the visions you've set for yourself, it's going to take every little bit of layered opportunity to reach that goal. And so you won't want to miss any of those opportunities in order to be able to meet your visions. And I think that will be the most challenge is to continue, is to try to make progress. It'll take little bits of progress as well as big investments to be able to meet your climate and energy visions.
Yeah, Ed, please.
Mr. Bull, I appreciate this. Can you explain, one of the things that you talk about here is identifying the metrics, which the benefits can be measured. I think that's critically important. You touched on it a little bit. How far out are we going to go with that? We already heard of a plan that we're looking at out to 2030. Are you going to have metrics to measure things out to 2030 or beyond, or just for 5 years, or what's your thought on that?
Well, Madam Chair, Councilmember Ruska, I think one of the things, I think in our way we're thinking about it, it'll be metrics for the investments that would be made. So the paybacks, essentially, as well as climate progress. So the energy, the carbon emission goals, and what those goals, to meet your vision, what those targets will need to be, and the like.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Any other comments or questions? Thanks very much. I'd just like to add that, for me, the question of how we can have affordable, reliable, clean energy is the question that is on everybody's mind. And there is such a huge opportunity right now with the Clean Power Plan and with the really great leadership of some of Minnesota's, both the nonprofit community, local governments, the state just yesterday announced our intention to put out an RFP for a large solar garden to help supply significant parts of the state's energy needs. The solar tax credit, which is going to be expiring at the end of next year. So I think this just fits so well into the big opportunity that is in front of the entire state to really create a competitive advantage around a green, clean energy future. So I'm really excited to hear the outcomes, and we won't put too much pressure on you, but a little bit of pressure.
A little bit of pressure. We feel a little bit of pressure.
Right, yeah, right, right. Good. Thank you very much.
Thank
We
you.
look forward to seeing you all next month, I mean. Wonderful. Well, the next item on our agenda is a discussion of affordable housing that Olmsted County is going to take the lead on. And so I'd like to please welcome County Commissioner Padulka up, and also the Housing Director, Jacobson. Thank you very much. And I don't know, Jim, I feel like I'm in your area here, since these are your colleagues.
No, I've asked Stephanie Podolsky. She's going to assume the chair next year. She's been involved with the affordable housing. It's one of her big focuses. And then Cheryl, we've just hired in the last year or so to be the HRA director. So I thought they would be the best to give a synopsis of what we're up to at Olmsted County.
Thank you very much, and welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. So I am Stephanie Podolsky, and I represent District 1 of Olmsted County, which is the downtown district and a lot of the core neighborhoods around that district. I know we have about 10 minutes of your valuable time, so I would like to just, I would like to talk a little bit about the history of the HRA and how it's changed and what we plan to do. And Cheryl will talk about, so I'll talk about a little bit about policies, and Cheryl will talk about the nitty-gritty things about how we think we may spend that money. So the history of the HRA is that it was started in Olmsted County in the mid-70s. It moved from the planning department to community services in 2014. It serves about, at the moment, it serves about 800 low and moderate income households, and it has an annual budget of about $5 million with a staff of 11. We think those things are going to change. Paul Wilson, Commissioner Paul Wilson, who also represents a lot of the core neighborhoods, approached me in 2012 and asked me if I could see this looming housing crisis coming down the road. And I said, yes, I could. And he thought, what shall we do about it? So what we planned was a housing summit. We did that in 2013. And part of that housing summit was to present the Maxfield study, which we had, the clinic and the city and the county had underwritten. Essentially, that report showed the present need, the future needs, and the percent of people who are what we call housing cost burdened, which is that they pay more than 30% of their income for housing. Turns out in Olmsted County that 25% of homeowners and 45% of renters fall in that category, pay more than 30% of their income for housing. I was on the HRA board at the time, and I wondered if we could restructure the HRA to start to meet some of those needs. And we appealed to the state to change it from out of the city into being a county HRA. We hired a brilliant woman away from Dakota County, and we started to restructure our HRA. Our goal for it is that it will become self-financed and self-sustaining agency with its own levy line. And what would that percentage be? And that was a lot of those two ideas. Would the HRA have its own levy line, and what percent of would that be? Took up a lot of conversations at the county board, I can assure you of that. The state has clear restrictions on how much an HRA levy can be. It cannot exceed more than 0.0185% of the total estimated market value of property in the county. We considered a fair levy for the first year would be $1 million. And $1 million would add about $12 a year to the property tax bill of an average $200,000 house. So you know where that would fit. Well, then we discovered that there was $350,000 of that million would be needed to cover a shortfall that what the HRA had not been getting from the federal government. So also with a spirited discussion, we decided that we might add $350,000 to that $1 million so that the HRA would still have $1 million to work with. Now, the final vote on that will take place after budget hearings, so it could still change, but that's where it is at the moment. The other big change is that since it's taxpayer money, the HRA board will consist of the county board. So they will run the HRA, and that will start in January. One of the groups that was very influential in helping us with this is the Greater Minnesota Housing Fund. And they helped finance that study, and they reported to us that communities that have skin in the game get a lot more grants and consideration at the state level, sometimes up to $26 more for every dollar we put in. So that is that's a wonderful leverage. And out of all of this, one of the exciting ideas that's come up is, it's still in a draft form, but it's called a housing framework. A kind of a funder's collaborative. be overseen by the Rochester Area Foundation to be the stewards of a capital campaign. So that's still in the draft form, but we're working on it. So financial support then would come from Olmsted County levy money, from cities that are providing TIFs, and potential representatives from the DMC. We could work together to determine local housing priorities, develop an application process, develop an application scoring criteria, and ultimately determine which developments could receive funding. Since the staff at Olmsted HRA may play an important and significant role in this process, it justifies the use of HRA funds for staff support and organizational development. I want to talk briefly now from the heart about the role of all of us in this community-wide housing shortage and labor shortage, because we all know that those two things are connected. If people cannot live here, they cannot work here, and we need workers. I believe that a great percent of the 45,000 to 35,000 new jobs that DMC is going to create will be lower wage jobs. People to clean hospital rooms, people to work in nursing homes, people to serve meals, people to clean hotel rooms, service jobs. Hard-working people who have low to moderate incomes. Our community stands on the shoulders of low and moderate income workers. The least we can do is provide them stable and safe housing. We wouldn't be here if we all didn't believe in the possibilities of human potential and social change. And we know from a study just published by Raj Chetty that those children who live in the bottom 20% of the economy do better and move more easily out of poverty if they are raised in an environment of safety and diversity. So when we think about how to serve the working poor with workforce housing, I believe, and it's important for you to understand, I don't speak here for the county board, but for myself and other people, but not officially for the board, that distributed workforce housing will improve all of us. That may take the form of inclusionary zoning. And I know that for some developers and others, that is not a popular stance. There's not much the county can do about inclusionary zoning because it's really a city policy, and it's tied to TIFs and other enticements to develop and build new housing. But I would ask that you, as the DMCC board, as the city and county work this out, as we develop the housing framework draft plan, that you would support efforts to encourage the capital campaign and fairness that includes workforce housing, especially in neighborhoods near the downtown core. If people have to drive to work, it's not really affordable housing. And that's the third leg of this stool. A transit plan that would get people from their homes to work and back in a schedule that takes into consideration different shift times and weekend shifts. So it all needs to be coordinated: labor, transit, housing, and we have a chance right here to do this brilliantly. I think we can. It's a convoluted knot of things that has to be worked out together. So thank you for asking me here to talk about this, and I'll just ask you for your support as we work through this process for housing. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Mr. Beer?
Yeah, just one thing, I'd like to echo what Stephanie says. You know, even with this levy, whether it ends up at $1 million or $1.3 million, it's important to realize that we have to have a public-private cooperation. Even if we had $1.3 million, we really can't do much with that. It's a lot of money. I'd like to have it in my pocket, but it's not a lot of money in the big scheme of things for affordable housing. So it's really important that we work with the Rochester Area Foundation and have this public-private cooperation where the private enterprises help out with this and we can team together and build some affordable housing. Because like Stephanie says, I mean, if we, you know, we're these people, this is workforce housing, and these people are, you know, on the lower end of the scale, and they're gonna need some help with some housing. Otherwise, DMC is not gonna work. I mean, it's not all about doctors and radiologists and that, so.
No.
I guess,
Ed, please.
Stephanie, thank you for the presentation. I was wondering, is there any way that, I guess I'd be interested in learning where you've identified people you say we stand on their shoulders, you know, how critical they are. Do you have any data that shows where they live now? Are they in the downtown? Are they in the outskirts? Are they in smaller towns? Is there anything that you have that we could look at now to see what's working and what isn't?
I think they're all struggling to find housing, and a lot of them have had to go to the smaller cities to find things that they can afford. And I believe that the smaller cities like Byron and Chatfield and Stewartville, Pine Island, are worried about what will happen to their infrastructure if that's where everyone has to go to live. That's going to put pressure on their schools. I wish I had, maybe you have that answer.
Not right offhand, but I do believe that we identified that in the Maxfield Housing Needs Assessment.
Do you remember what it is then?
I don't, I'm sorry. I could get you back to that with you, with that number.
And it's important to realize too, this is gonna be a countywide levy, so we are looking at projects. Stewartville already has their own HRA board, so they're not participating in this. But with Byron, Chatfield, Dover, Eota, all the small towns, Pine Island, if there are viable projects out there, and I think there will be, some of these dollars will go there too. I mean, it's affordable housing for Olmsted County. So, but realistically, you know, a lot of the projects are gonna be in Rochester, downtown in the core.
Part of that will be getting people, a way for people to get into town and out of town without adding to the traffic problems that we have. So that's part of the transit plan, would be to expand our transit system to accommodate people moving from, I mean, there are people who drive from the Twin Cities now every day to work here. It's amazing.
Lots.
If you look at, there's a chart that the planning department had with arrows. The size of the arrows were how many people come in to town from the greater county and from the state, even from Wisconsin and Iowa. It's amazing the attraction that Rochester has. And of course, you all struggle with where do they park when they come into town? How do they get here?
Mr. George?
Jim, I was pleased to hear you say that they're going to be built in Rochester, because just as a visitor of the city, I'm struck by how little housing there is here. And I don't see much. It may be, but it's pretty well hidden away within confines where you can walk to work and do things. If we're going to create a lot more job opportunities, hospitality type jobs, other jobs, I think that's absolutely necessary, and it can overcome the cost of commuting and having cars to do that. We're seeing in Minneapolis, Mayor Rybak and I were just talking about this, but a huge inflow right now into the city. Huge, I mean enormous. And interesting enough, it was stimulated by a very modest public project, something called the Greenway. And, you know, it was an old rail line, and it wasn't that big a deal, but it created a huge inflow, and everyone wants to come into the city now, and they want to take light rail, they want to, you know, they want to move by public transportation, and they don't want to have so many cars. But there is, and it's also created a vibrancy, and that's the other thing I'd point out. When you have housing in the city, it creates a vibrancy. People are looking for opportunities and get together and create communities. So we have great communities here. I'm not taking it down, but I'm just seeing it around the country. Among the millennials and the Gen Xers, there's a great desire to move into the city. There's a big change. From what we've seen the last 40 years. It's a huge change in other parts of the country.
Thank you. Mayor Rybak?
Madam Chair-elect, or what do we call you, Commissioner, that was a really compelling statement I think you made. I really appreciate that, and I think your passion for this issue is going to be, not only should we thank you for it, but it's going to be needed, because moving this discussion through a community about how a community grows and how it grows in an inclusive way that creates a workforce, the workforce we need involves hundreds of different and sometimes difficult issues that are going to require your eloquence on that issue. So that was really moving to me. You're going to have to be out there a lot on this, as we all are. I think there are a couple issues that I think are especially important. I felt Ed asked a really good question that we should come back with some data on. And I think the good news is we happen to have one employer that happens to bring most of the people here, so there may be a single source that can help us very clearly see where is the workforce coming from. Second, how does that workforce stratify into ways that translate into housing? Meaning, as you heard the comments here, all of them are part of an affordable housing continuum, but they're all somewhat different pieces of it. The millennial who we want to attract here requires a place to live, and there's not a very good collection of opportunities here. The single mother with 3 kids who needs at least 2 or 3 bedrooms in that unit, and who's the person who gives dignity to your grandfather as his bedpan is being emptied, is somebody we should really have a place for in this community. The person who is working their way up the ladder and may have stopped at a certain point and needs to make a decision about whether my job can grow here or not is another part. So the point I'm making is, let's look at affordable housing as a whole, but then disconnect all of those elements so that we've got real targets within all of that. I think, there are a couple of big questions here about who leads what discussion. Land use and where things belong and how communities grow, in my mind, is a city issue. And I think we all want to be very supportive, but I feel, the city really has to have the conversation about how are we going to make things happen, and how do we have those neighborhood conversations about how they grow. I think the city needs to then send us signals about that. We, I think, have tremendous leverage, and you mentioned the term inclusionary housing, which of course would mean that we would, and other people would, tie any sort of public investment to the ability of that developer to have housing that hits some of these targets we want. In Minneapolis, for instance, we require at least 20% affordable housing for any project that we invest in, and over the past 10 years, we really didn't invest in any market rate housing. It was all about affordable investment. But we have that potential leverage here at this entity, again, if we get a signal from the city about this. I think there's also a really interesting connection here as we look at some of those other communities surrounding the Chatfields and the others. When we were in our transportation discussion, I was just surfacing this idea that if we think about not only where the bus leaves work, but where it picks up and leaves at home, we really have an opportunity to reshape some main streets. Put these two things together and think about the fact that, sitting in the position you are, we could really ground these some housing on main streets where the bus could also go at night, and we could really enliven some of those main streets. So now, instead of citing affordable housing and it's difficult, and we're putting people on the outskirts of a town where they need a car, we could be moving them from a smaller town with a vibrant main street where the bus is outside the front door, and then they can come to the same experience here, and certainly wouldn't need 2 cars and maybe only 1. That idea of connection is one that you folks, I think, sit in the best position on, and that's not, our role is to support that. So I just think we all need to figure out how we can get our roles together.
That would be a sea change, as Commissioner Beer likes to say, where development would be driven by where the transit is,
Yeah.
rather than transit responding to development. And that may be part of what I hope would be our brilliant plan.
Good.
We really have a chance to put this all together in a way that is fair and equitable for everyone.
And
thank you for your comment.
The city administration provided some, I don't know if they got to all of you, but the documentation of the current housing projects under construction and proposed in the DMC area core neighborhoods. And right now we have 760 units that are either being built or will be built, with about 100 of those being affordable apartments. Citywide, though, we have a bigger picture here of, I think there's 2,000 to 3,000 units right now that are in the pipeline or being built or completed, with the majority of those being market rate. So there has been a lot of new growth here in the recent year or so, but not too much of it in the downtown, more of it kind of in the perimeter, so something to
It's
keep in
really
mind.
exciting that that's happening.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, colleagues, I know we could continue talking about this at some length, but I feel like I probably ought to move us along to the other items on our agenda. So I just want to thank you so much for sharing your, I know I'm really sorry, but I'm feeling like, but maybe I don't want to be, is there, I had thought your PowerPoint presentation was really excellent. We didn't really go through it, but would you like, is there anything in particular that you'd like to just draw our attention to before we move on? I think the information on the vacancy rates is just a really good example of the challenge we have ahead of us.
The vacancy rates are almost non-existent, and I think it's important for Cheryl to explain a little bit about the continuum and where we've decided to spend some of this money, so you understand where it's going. And if you give her a minute and a half, I think she can do that.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. I won't take much time, but I would like to run through our housing continuum that we've laid out for the HRA levy that was approved and supported by the Olmsted County Board of Commissioners. As Commissioner Podolsky said, we do have targeted about $350,000 for administrative costs. The Olmsted County HRA is also a public housing authority under federal definition, and so we have to deal with some funding shortfalls within our federal programs, and then as also covering some operational costs. So that's what that first bucket is there. The next three areas are where we are targeting our program and developing programs to build a continuum that addresses the needs of several different populations within Olmsted County, vulnerable populations as well as the workforce. Our first bucket is titled Homeless Prevention and Housing Stability, and we're targeting about $100,000 towards that programming area, which would really focus on serving families and homeless youth and achieving housing stabilization for that, for those two populations. It could also include some transitional housing as well as emergency housing. Our second bucket of ideas or funding area is the housing development category. At this point, we are targeting about $500,000. It's not a lot, but it's a start, and so we're very pleased with that. And this would be the category that would speak to Commissioner Beer's statement about the partnering, the public-private partnerships. I'd also add a leg to that stool, not only public-private, but also nonprofit partnerships. Finding developers who would be interested in developing in Olmsted County workforce housing, senior housing, supportive housing type units. Under this category as well, we've talked a little bit about a funders collaborative. It would include a gap financing program potential that would support that funders collaborative, which would very much mirror the state of Minnesota process in their super RFP. And so the hopes with that would be that the collaborative would bring funding to the table. Developers would apply to that collaborative. Projects would be funded. They would have a letter in order to take to the state process in order to leverage state dollars. The last category is housing rehabilitation. One of the identified areas of programming has been housing rehabilitation for low and moderate income homeowners as well as senior households. And so we are looking to target about $400,000 towards this category. We'd look to enhance the City of Rochester's program already and then expand a similar program to the small cities. And so really pushing that out. And then also potentially use some of those funds to repair and update HRA-owned units. And so that is where we're targeting our HRA levy dollars at this point. We call it our housing continuum, and it will grow and change as we work through the process. So thank you for just a couple minutes on that topic. Thanks.
Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Yep.
Good.
Could I have one more question?
Yeah,
I'm so
please, Mayor
sorry.
Ryback.
This is a really good start. I think we know, and you're coming from the Dakota County HRA, which is one of the leaders in the state. You realize this is good, and this is also a relatively modest investment, so we're going to have to be super smart about this. One of the things that we should be doing in looking at this, when you're looking at dollars that are a good start but aren't a huge amount, is let's connect a couple conversations. You've heard people coming in here talking about historic preservation at almost every single meeting we have. If you think about the second floor and third floor of historic Main Street buildings in downtown Rochester and in all of these different main streets for a very, very modest cost in comparison to many other types of development, if you clustered that together and did that as a single package, saying we're going to restore the housing above the corner store on main streets and in downtown, that's a major historic preservation play. That's a really smart way of getting workers right to the main core. And it's also a way to attract private investment because it's kind of a new way of connecting preservation to transportation to affordable housing. So let's all think creatively about this and try to partner on some ways to do that.
I like that, RT, and I think that also is a creative way to reuse these buildings. I mean, they're there and it just fits in. So I really like that idea. I hope that's something that we can make part of instead of looking at traditional ways, look at some non-traditional ways, and think out of the box a little bit. So very good idea.
The last thing I'll say is we're gonna have to work closely with our partners at the city. I mean, for the county, I mean, we're imposing a tax, but we're the city councils, Rochester especially, but all the city councils, we're gonna have to work because the zoning and, where we set up these areas is gonna be critical, so.
Excellent. Thank you very, very much. Really appreciate it. And I'd like to welcome Mayo Clinic and the EDA to the table to talk about the patient and visitor experience.
Thanks.
Thank you. Welcome.
Morning. All right. Madam Chair and DMCC Board, thank you very much for the invitation to share a bit of our information about the research that we've done through DMC and Mayo Clinic, basically on patient experience and the work that we're doing around the experience for patients, visitors, and companions. We're going to share a little bit today. It'll be a summary, of course, a 30-minute summary on research activities, some of our results, and then some examples of how we're trying to close the gap that we learned that we have in terms of the patient satisfaction. So I'd like to introduce Jeff Bolton, our EDA board chair, whom you already know. Heidi Mestad is a DMC manager working with the EDA and Mayo Clinic. Dr. Sandhya Pruthi is a physician at Mayo Clinic in general internal medicine. She's also the physician medical director for the Patient Experience Office in Rochester, Minnesota. So I think we'll have Jeff start us off.
Sure. Madam Chair, members of the board, I'm going to put the patient experience in a little broader context and then talk about Mayo Clinic. Dr. Pruthi, Heidi will talk about the patient experience in the community. As everybody's aware, there's a lot of disruption in the healthcare industry today, everything from healthcare reform driven largely by the government, but we're also seeing reform of payer and provider networks, payer consolidations, and then also provider consolidations. I'm going to zoom in demographic changes and other things, but I'm going to zoom in two that are really critical as we think about Mayo Clinic as a destination medical center. The first is the formation of narrow networks. And the key issue there is that the narrow network construct is one that will limit access to destination facilities like Mayo Clinic. And it's a serious threat to being a destination medical center. We've got a number of strategies in place to work with both payers and employers to ensure that a large portion of the U.S. population has access to Mayo Clinic through their insurance products, and we're making some very good progress there. The other key issue is that we have many local community healthcare organizations that are investing heavily in marketing and also investing in their facilities to create a Mayo-like experience. And Mayo's success, for Mayo to be successful, we need people to drive by or fly over many of those very good healthcare organizations, but we feel we provide a superior product, particularly with complex care. So those are two trends that are important, and as we think about patients driving by or flying over other healthcare centers, clearly our outcomes, our value that we create for patients are critical, but also the experience that they have in and outside of the clinic, again, with many of those patients spending 2 to 4 days and some spending months and up to a year in the Rochester community. The second issue, which is critical in terms of the community experience, is something the board was talking about, and that's the reurbanization trend. The idea that employees want to live in an urban environment, and the Urban Land Institute indicated that there's a strong drive toward that. And again, to support that, we need a vibrant downtown area that provides, as was discussed in the previous presentation, a variety of housing opportunities that serve the entire workforce. So those are overarching trends. As we look at the DMC, this is a tremendous and very unique opportunity where we've got the state, the county, the city, a whole variety of community organizations working with Mayo Clinic to create an environment that is of the highest quality for patients, companions, visitors, and community residents. So I think we have a unique opportunity, and we're making excellent progress. Just in terms of our strategic plan, and these are the key goals of Mayo Clinic, people, process, and outcomes. And I'll start at the top with an outcome goal: deliver highest value care to be most trusted and affordable. And there are several measures under that that look at patient safety, clinical outcomes, accessibility to Mayo Clinic, but also one critical one that relates to today's discussion is to deliver an unparalleled patient experience. And we measure that by being top decile performance in patient satisfaction. We're also looking at top decile performance in all the other metrics as well. And within our process goals, achieving operational excellence, again, many of those are focused on improving quality, safety, and other performance metrics value. We do have 2 tactics that are oriented toward the patient experience, and Dr. Pruthi is really the physician leader on those initiatives, and I work for Dr. Pruthi in that regard, so I serve on the committee as well. It is a critical part of our efforts to improve excellence. I thought I'd share with you Mayo Clinic's, and this is our composite performance.
It's pretty good.
It's pretty good. And it does indicate that we are top decile. Now, this is a composite. The Rochester campus is at the 93rd percentile. And again, this is relative to hospitals across the country. Now, that doesn't mean we can't improve. We have some dissatisfiers. Parking is one, and hopefully with the transportation studies that we're doing, we'll be able to collaborate and improve our parking situation. Our Board of Governors has asked for parking for the 21st century, and we view that as a great opportunity to work with the DMC. Our billing system is another opportunity for improvement. But again, this is driven heavily by the patient experience in the clinical realm. And I'll now turn it over to Heidi.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm going to talk a little bit about all the different patient activities or the research activities that we've done, and then some of the key findings. And then Dr. Pruthi will be able to talk a little bit on some of the programs that we're currently doing, and then at what Mayo Clinic and how we're aligning each other. So you can see here over the last 5 years, there's been a lot of research and studies around experience and what we've been able to compile. Some that DMC conducted themselves and others that they've been a part of. We could, just to honor our time, we could really be here for almost the whole day talking about each one of these individually. The ones that are relevant for today that really laid the foundation of the key findings is the DMC market segmentation study. That's the quantitative. We'll discuss that. The patient and companion journey mapping. There's actually a total of 35 different journey maps that have been done. There's 2 we're going to highlight today. One is the Northwestern study that was also done in partnership with Mayo Clinic Center for Innovation. I'll move this a little closer here. And then also the Seamless Experience Pilot Proton Beam Journey Mapping that was just recently done in 2015, and Dr. Pruthi will take us through that. Also, I think it's important to understand what Mayo Clinic is actually measuring, and so the patient satisfaction scores, we'll discuss how Mayo Clinic is measuring that patient satisfaction, and also how we can look at how to measure that 70% of the time outside for the patient, and how we actually start looking at new metrics. So I think this is just to give a little bit of who that we researched before we dive into what it is that we found. And so there's a qualitative study done. It's really important to look at, to have the numbers and the statistics and the percentages, which we'll talk about here in the next slide. But there's also a whole new layer of understanding, a deeper understanding of the patient and the companion themselves, when you can actually follow them along their whole journey, look at all their observations, talk with them at each of their key touch points, have some in-depth interviews. And so that's what this research study was, which was done, really following the patients and the companions, and then at each of their key touch points, talking to the community members that also interacted with the patients there. So that was, this will look at some of the key findings. Also, I think as we discussed, a great unique characteristic of Rochester is this integration and intersection of all these different users. Here, and just for today, we're going to call them market segments, but these are our users and our audiences in a downtown. And so it's really this intersection. Anytime that you walk onto the Peace Plaza, you'll run into patients, companions, employees, community members, business travelers. It's really kind of that synergy that creates that extra vibrancy downtown that makes Rochester unique. And so we'll look at the key market findings that also have been for a large sample that was done, and really looking at each of those 4 key areas here. We can dive into more stats, and again, but we can talk about the rest of those studies, or if you want more information later about the process or the methodology, we can talk to during questions. So it's important to look at who is coming here to Rochester, and so we have an average of 2.76 million visitors. A large percentage, 67%, are coming here for the Mayo Clinic. The majority of that 67% are patients and companions. So at any given day, we have an average of approximately 3,000 patients and companions here. We also know that there's a lot of other opportunities to leverage Mayo Clinic. And so if you look at the conventions and sports, there's 19% of our visitors that make up, that come for conventions and sporting. 20% of that 19% is related to healthcare. So as we also know, we have the convention center expansion. There's just there's even more opportunity to grow that percentage even more as we continue and leverage Mayo Clinic. As we talk about patients and companions, which will be the majority of today's, at least this brief presentation, we also need to acknowledge about the commuters that come here. And so they're not official community residents living in Rochester, but at every day, 28,000 individuals commute into Rochester for work. So this is a simple, instead of looking at Excel spreadsheets, we thought we'd put it into at least a friendly infographic for you. This is really looking at the patients and companions. They are our largest economic impact, and so they make up 1.2 million of our visitation. We know a few key facts about it. Jeff had touched a little bit on it as well. The patients and companions, they always usually travel in 2. Patients rarely come by themselves. We also know that the average duration is 2 to 4 nights. As Mayo Clinic continues to grow in specialty care, we even know that they actually can stay much longer, as Jeff acknowledged, for months. We know that as an average spend for an overnight stay has an economic value as opposed to of $264 to a day spend. And we also know that the patients and companions are a key audience to really understand their needs and their wants and their preferences because they have all that free time. We've continually heard about the 70% and the 30%. That's significant, and it's significant to know that a lot of the research all about patients has been about that 30% inside. And so over these last 2 to 5 years, we've been really trying to gather all the needs and wants also outside so then we can connect both of them. We also have an opportunity in our community residents in that we have a leakage. We know that every year there's $5,000 is leaked outside of Rochester, and that's in dining and retail. And we know those are the same offerings or activities that also the companions, the visitors, and the business individuals want too. So there's just opportunity to keep that money here. Now, if you look in parallel, I can run a quick same story around business visitors. And so the reason why we're really focusing on patients is that visitors usually only they only travel by themselves. They're usually only here 1 to 2 nights. And so you can look at the economic impact. And as we actually are looking at what key things to build, it's very important for businesses, but also about patients and visitors too. This is a slide I think that has been a huge aha moment, I think, for a lot of great reasons. And this is really the foundation that all that other research in the very beginning slide that I started with really only validated. We can continue to do more research, but all of it will just continue to validate all the key findings that we've done. And this experience gap is something that's significant to just touch on in that during that qualitative study and following patients around, and we also identified it when we did the proton beam, the patients and companions have a high level of confidence anytime they touch Mayo Clinic. They felt that they're the right place at the right time. They did not have the high level of confidence when they were touching any time in the community within their journey. So this doesn't mean that Mayo Clinic is doing fantastic. Well, you are. I mean, you're 93 percentile. And the community is doing poorly. But what it really means is that there's an opportunity is when the patient's a patient, they're feeling they're in the right place at the right time. When they're feeling they're a customer because they're now out in the community, they don't have that high level of confidence that they're in the right place at the right time or finding the right things that is that they want to do. Or they didn't know that it even existed when it really did. So what there's opportunity here is really to integrate that and close that gap together and work through in collaboration and then raise that overall experience, the quality of that experience overall.
Can I just ask a question before we go on? Because you've given us a lot of data so far, which I find extremely interesting. We've got some on the quality gap. Do you have any data to back this up? This is a very strong chart about the experience gap. And is there anything that stands behind it? Right now, it just looks like a couple of arrows, one up, one down. But
yeah, absolutely.
What stands behind this?
Yes. So I could show you all of the different journeys, the 30 patients that were followed, and they were acknowledged at each of their touch points at key questions and what their emotional journey was. And so that's that high level of confidence is around their emotional journey. And so there's 30 individual studies that go with that to back that up. We just didn't include them into the appendix here.
How consistent was that when you have on the blue line? On the blue line that's trending downward?
Yeah. What was that? Sorry.
Across those 30 people, how consistent was that on the blue line?
On the blue, very consistent.
Was it?
So yeah, and I can get that exact number. As Jeff just pointed out too, the quality gap touches more on the quantitative to back up that qualitative. And so that's that high level of satisfaction with the activities and offerings here. So there are two, the experience gaps, the emotional journey, which it's very consistent with all those key themes. That quality gap, that's where the quantitative piece comes in within that market segments, those 4 users. From here, we know that this is a significant, as we talked about the reurbanization and attracting and retaining talent, people want to come to a place that have a sense of place that they feel connected to. And here, residents said that they were 29% highly satisfied with the activities and offerings in Rochester, whereas patients were 45% satisfied. So there's an experience gap and a quality gap, or as we can just say, there's lots of opportunity to continue to grow in these areas. The key findings off of that experience gap and the quality isn't just one building or one place or one product. It's really about looking at integrating the key areas that make a place a place. And so not creating one things in just each circle in silos, but really looking at these key areas within livability, commercial research and technology, health and wellness, learning environment, arts, culture and entertainment, transportation, sports, recreation and nature, and hospitality and convention. I call all those out because those are the 8 core areas of focus that are part of DMC, and those were created for a reason because of the information and key findings from the research. Here's a little more of the quantitative pieces that really stand out. This is looking at the market segmentation. This is a percentage, it's a range scale, and we can talk about the methodology here as well. But I think you can look at, there's a question that had a whole list of different types of activities and offerings. And you can look at it all on the left-hand side. And I'm sure we would probably resonate or connect with a lot of these if we were visitors or patients going somewhere else. What are these things that were important to us to do? So here we'll talk about the patients, companions, and business visitors. I'll show you one for the community members as well. A few things to pull out that I think just resonate with where DMC is at now and currently going is that you can see that there's a large percentage between all 3 of those market users that are really looking for a space that's around health, wellness, nutrition, fitness, really looking at with the consumer trends right now anyways. You also can see from the business visitors that there's an opportunity for high quality hotel options. If you also look even around there, the different types of range and casual dining options to even the range up to upscale dining options. And so there's just a lot of range, just as in housing, the same here within retail, dining, and other range of entertainment activities. This one's important to call out is sometimes, you can look at the significant ones that pop right to your eye within the business. So yes, each user has its own distinct needs, but there is really where they have a lot of similarities. And here, the more family entertainment options is something that really runs through and will even continue more within the patient and companions as our pediatric base grows too. We also know that across the board, other opportunities for informal learning or knowledge, such as museum type, is also significant and greatly needed, which is echoed around, which is what the community is looking for too. So we can talk about patient needs or visitor needs, but it's all really about commonality. They have a lot of the similar needs and wants and preferences and similar likelihood to use them. It's just more about how do you start building it together for the priority areas. So the community itself, the casual dining, more family entertainment, live music, those are the top 3, which obviously resonates for what types of activities or offerings the other users are looking for.
Heidi, can I just point out the bottom one there? It's kind of interesting after what we just heard and talked about.
No, I think that's very relevant. Yeah, absolutely.
Surprising.
Madam Chair, just a small thing as we're looking at this. I don't think we need this now, but a heat chart would be really helpful. What I mean by that is that there may not be a whole lot of people who want that spa or wellness option, but people who will intensely make a visit, if that's included, is different than if they say yes or no.
Yeah, we can run a statistical meaning chart with the heat map. Yep,
Thanks.
Absolutely. It's a great idea. So when we look here, we know that there's shared markets, mostly because the patient and companion base can't support this alone, all this growth. And so when we look at the business visitors, the community, we need to say, okay, where's that overlap in just a brief Venn diagram? So in a brief heat snapshot on here, these are some of the programs, products, places that are constantly overlapping at higher percentages. And so we know that the authenticity of what Rochester is very important. We know that the diverse dining and shopping, all the way from different types of arts and culture and indoor public spaces, but that's also just indoor places or outdoor where people can interact, and then all the way to the diverse housing. To call out here, I think it's also important, not just types that you can rent or own, but extended stay and medical housing. I think that's important too, to at least point out. So I think there's lots of things already going on here at Mayo Clinic. I'm going to introduce Dr. Pruthi, who has been a wonderful collaborator with DMC as we align the inside patient experience strategy with how DMC can look at creating that same strategy to create that seamless experience. So Dr. Pruthi, I'll hand it over
Thank
to
you, Heidi, Madam Chair and DMCC Board. It's an honor to be here.
Welcome.
I'm going to talk a little bit about the patient experience. And the reason I asked for this slide, I wanted you to see that from the provider's perspective, those of us who see physicians, we value the quality, the safety, and the outcomes, which is the excellence we provide in patient care. But we also listened to the voice of our patient, and that's the patient's perspective, which is on your right. And we conducted surveys that have been going on for 3 years using a third-party vendor to capture the voice of the patient about the service points. How well do we provide access, responsiveness to their needs, their interaction with their care team. But we also asked about the role of the facility and getting around and billing. And Jeff highlighted that there are areas where we know we needed to improve. And for example, getting around, parking was highlighted as a significant concern by our patients and getting around. And we listened to the data, and because it's our lowest scores, we are looking at what can we do to improve parking, and we've actually just recently signed on with a valet service so we could provide valet at 3 components of our campus for our patients because we heard from them that was what they wanted. But we can do better, and that's where we can integrate with DMCC because we're just asking within the walls of Mayo what we can improve. What we could do even better is that 70% time. How can we improve that experience outside of Mayo? And that's where we need to capture that data. This next slide that I have here is a little bit more, and back to me being a physician, is what have I seen through the patient experience. And I work with breast cancer patients, and I'm going to take you through this just to highlight what happens. On the y-axis, you see the concerns and stress. But on the x-axis, you see all the different elements and the factors that our patients have to think about when they choose to come to Mayo. And what we're doing here is we're thinking of the questions and the points in their care when they first start. Where is the best place to seek treatment? Why should I come across what Jeff described, 3 different medical institutions across the country to come to Mayo? Where will I stay when I come here? What will I need when I come here? So if you think of a breast cancer patient, she's making these decisions. Now we're going to take you through those stress points because that's what the red is, their healthcare concerns. But once they're here with us in the blue, that's the treatment. We now see a decline in their health concerns because now they're integrated with that comprehensive healthcare team that we provide at Mayo, and we take them through their chemotherapy, their radiation, and their treatment. But what is going on in their mind now is this stress, which is their non-care related concerns. What do I do when I'm here? What else can I get from Rochester? Where can I eat? What can I do with my family when they come here to join me during these times when I'm getting my health care? And that's what the blue highlights, that experience. And that's the kind of journey maps that we're capturing over and over from our patients, that we need to broaden our understanding of that journey. It's not just what I get when I see my doctor and the treatments that Mayo provides, but that experience outside of the community. So Heidi mentioned the proton beam therapy, and that is actually an amazing opportunity we had to be able to work with our patients and our community and DMC to show you an example of how we needed to be thinking together of that experience, collaborating the patient with the community. And in this slide, you see that, again, they travel, when patients come, they travel with companions. If you're going to get a proton beam therapy, you're not here for 1 day. You could be here up to 6 weeks in Rochester. And when they're staying here, their treatments may last short sessions, which are about 30 minutes. And then they've got that family who needs to spend the rest of their day in Rochester and their time in our community. Especially now as we see the value of proton beam therapy for the pediatric population, we're starting to see that 25% of our patients who are coming are pediatric, and they're going to need the services not just of the healthcare, but the community. So I'm going to tell you a story, and I'm going to use Ellen. Ellen is a 6-year-old, and Ellen comes here not just because she's excited about the treatment Mayo can give her as we manage her disease, but she brings with her her parents and her siblings, and and this family needs to know, what are we going to do? And these are what we call the key influencers. If you look on the right, there's the distance of the travel they have to make. What's their status? Are they coming here for the first time, or are they coming because they're returning? Who are they bringing with them, their support? What are the needs of those children, both the patient themselves and the siblings? How long are they going to be here, and what are their cultural needs and their preferences? All of these are important to Ellen's family, and they're making decisions about am I going to get when I come to Rochester? And will we need to get daycare for the siblings? Will we need affordable extended stay lodging for the family unit? What about spaces to work for the father who comes on the weekend and he needs a place to work? What are the activities so that the child and her siblings can feel normal? What can they do in the community? And you heard about those other activities. What are the schooling options for Ellen? What about her siblings? We know that we need to work with our community, otherwise this family is not going to feel normal, and they need that connection to the community. So we need to partner with public schools, we need to partner with the restaurants because they need places to eat, and then they need stay lodging options. They need apartments because they're here for a long time. That's all part of the patient experience.
Could I stop, Madam Chair? Could I just stop on this for a second? Could you just go back to the last slide? By the way, this is great. If you look at this, there's a way that Mayo looks at it from treatment, and one of the reasons you do so well is because of all this. We're also looking at it in this case about extending the visitor dollars. I hate to be so mercenary. It's not the way but that's part of our job. So one of the issues we need to look at is, for instance, under the both parents being able to be here, what would actually allow someone to work remotely that couldn't? Okay, that in our metric is 5 more nights of the lodging. And that what is it to be able to bring a second sibling, I think we need to understand whether 25% in pediatrics, that's a lot. What condition are they in, and what is appropriate sort of recreation for them is important. How do we bring having seen the family dynamics sometimes when you're traveling, what happens to the other kids, it's super complex. What does that mean for us being able to say, hey, come here and we'll embrace your family? In just a rock bottom line, that's a lot of resource for the community. We want to do that in an appropriate way. So we don't need it now, but just help us send us cues on that.
And one of the beauties about this project, we knew we needed a navigator, a concierge, an individual who could help understand the individual needs of all those different families that you described and tailor their experience for when they're in the hospital based on their medical needs, and then when they're outside based on what they need from the community. And we can get a lot from that, and we really can leverage them. And Jeff has been wonderful in helping us to think big about that navigator, who can help differentiate the needs of those people based on their individual needs.
Mm-hmm. Very helpful.
So I want to touch on experience accreditation, and this is that exact partnership that we needed to understand that whole seamless experience between what the patient gets when they're within the walls of Mayo and when they leave. And that's the hospitality sector. Working with Mayo, the Rochester Community Visitor Board, and then get that quality that we're looking for. Quality when they're within the healthcare system and quality when they're outside of the healthcare system. And we've got some wonderful programs that you will hear more about, but I'm going to touch on. One is called the Certified Tourism Ambassador Program. And that's me working with my frontline staff within the walls of Mayo to say, what can you speak about the quality programs in the community that the patients are asking you about? Where are the hotels? Where's the best place to eat? And where should I spend my time with my child? I need to be in the community. And we want to inform our staff and give them the knowledge about the community. That's what the Certified Tourism Ambassador Program can do. We also have another program called Experience Dedicated. That's the measurements that Mr. George was asking about. Where can we capture more data about what are the quality experiences that we need for our staff, for our patients when they're in the Rochester community, and compare us to other cities who are doing similar work but meet that high quality. And finally, Service Recovery and Remark Portal. We need a tool to capture the patient's concerns. I oversee the Patient Concern Office in Rochester as well, and I hear the complaints about where we could do better within the walls. But patients also complain about their experiences outside of Mayo. And when they tell that to people within the outside, the community, we need to capture this, and it needs to be a two-way street. It's called the Remark Portal. And I think that's going to help us to help close that gap, so we know where we've got trends in service failure and where we can improve. I'm going to end with a story, and it probably touched my heart about a week ago when I asked a patient who I'd seen in the breast clinic that she needed to stay an extra day to get a breast biopsy because that was the only available slot. And she said, Dr. Pruthi, I can't stay. I can't stay in that hotel another night. Can I come back another day? That hurt me because I said, what happened? And she shared with me what had happened at the hotel. And she said, we can't stay at that place. We will go home. Can you reschedule me for another day when I can drive in the morning, have my biopsy, and go back home? And she was talking about a 100-mile drive. And that made me really touched by the fact that we need that experience to go quality across. She could have stayed, and it would have been great dollars for the city, but she chose not to. She said, I can't be in that place. And so I think we need to really value how we can bring that patient experience from within the walls to outside of Mayo, so we could all be speaking about the highest quality care we can provide. Thank you, and I'll turn it back to Heidi.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
So I think this is just the last slide to say, okay, so how is DMC at least going to move forward as we're in the implementation phase? We know that there's the key priority areas, the sub-districts going forward. And so we've built and designed an overall patient experience and user experience kind of key themes, and also acknowledge that these themes have been designed with Mayo Clinic to their new patient experience program plan. And so we're working off the same kind of key themes. These are nuanced a little bit with DMC. Just to go over a few of them, and also keep in your mind, you know, we have these 8 core areas, and we have these sub-districts. You have Heart of the City, where really hospitality meets medicine, and you have Discovery Square, where you just have knowledge and experience and opportunity to share that knowledge at the same time. And transportation, so everyone can get into Rochester, into downtown, and around to the places they want to go. And so when we look at creating that sense of welcome at places, at all the key touch points, this is really important. Back to your comment, Mr. George, where how do you really know along that emotional journey? We know that the only time that patients feel really confident is when they're inside, when they walk inside the Ganda and they have that holy moment. They can feel that sense of welcome and comfort and lack of anxiety. We can help with that before they even get to Mayo Clinic. So they can come in on a Sunday night and Mayo Clinic's doors are closed. So the hotels take them and run them through their scenario because they've already gone through the CTA program. But there's an opportunity where we could even in Heart of the City, for example, I'm just throwing things out, look at opportunities for a visitor center. That's at the time when patients get there. You can also look at places in the hotel room or little touches of we're really excited you're here in our community, and we're excited that Mayo Clinic's here to help take care of you. To facilitate the patient, companion, and visitor journey, for examples there, obviously we're continuing to support the CTA program. That's so you have face-to-face and people know how to get you to your next touch point. Also, we could leverage technology. We know Mayo Clinic has an app, and if patients are flying in, is there a way to integrate with that? So if the flight is delayed, then the transportation can be acknowledged, which then can alert your hotel room. So all of that can be taken care of and leveraged with the infrastructure. Looking at create opportunities for patients to just feel normal or have visitors have downtime. These are key pieces that really align also with Mayo Clinic's patient experience. This is all of those activities and offerings that I had talked about. Also that co-working space, if they're here for a while, one of the key findings was, I just want a place, can I just rent somewhere that I can have a desk? And so those were some other opportunities we can look at. And then really, within that key market finding, we know that people have already looked at Mayo, or having Rochester be America's city for health. They want to come here for that information, and they actually want to live and breathe and have it be immersive around them. And so there's lots of opportunities in Mayo, at transitions at Mayo, and then out in the community within Discovery Square, heart of the city, and in all of our transportation to really add that into it. So that's how we'll be moving forward in those key areas.
Thank you.
I think
Great,
we're
please.
leaving
I
it
thought it
open
was a
for
very
questions.
good presentation. Thank you very
Thank you
much,
so much.
all four of you, for your sharing this with us. I'm wondering, as part of this whole Destination Medical Center experience, whether Mayo has collected information on competing centers. In other words, what is the community experience like in areas that, well, where we have our major competitors, so to speak, such as Cambridge, Massachusetts, Boston, Massachusetts, Baltimore, Cleveland, Palo Alto, and Houston are the ones that come to mind as where I hear other people going when they have the kind of things that would cause them to come from a very long way to come here. Not routine things, but very serious things. There may be others, but those are the major centers I hear people talking about, should I go to X, Y, or Z? And I'm wondering how we've compared the experience in those communities to what we either have here, and does that help give us a blueprint of where we want to go?
So we had a consultant that actually did a pro bono research project for us, a friend of Mayo, and did a secret shopper experience at many of the centers that you identified. And the conclusion of that was that there were really no centers that compared to Mayo Clinic in terms of the clinical experience, the coordination of care, et cetera. But as you noted, many of those are located in urban settings with five-star hotels, a full range of hotels that we don't have here, and many cultural dining experiences, shopping experiences that don't exist in downtown Rochester. It's unlikely and probably not necessarily desirable that we replicate many of those urban experiences because they have negative sides to them as well. But I think the thing that it did identify and underscore is the importance of many of the attributes that are in the DMC set of goals, a full range of hotels that accommodate the full range of our patients and visitors, dining experience, a variety of dining experience, health and wellness opportunities are really critical as we look forward, both for Mayo and the types of hotels that we attract. So we do have, it's more qualitative experiences from that particular study.
Mr. George, also we, as we started to look across the country and started to speak about how we're integrating the community with Mayo Clinic experience, we are one of the few places that actually talks about the community working together with the healthcare organization. So patient experience in most venues right now is all about inside the walls of the clinical area. So when we spoke at the Barrel Institute, we were the only group talking about how you're doing it with the community. So there's some work to be done, and I don't think the information is shared readily, if you will, from other organizations. Most of the information these other cities have shared with us are really about the development that's going on around the healthcare organization.
Back to the example, the poignant example you gave of a patient who wasn't happy with the hotel. You know, you don't have to stay in an expensive hotel to be treated very well. And it's a question of how people are treated. Right. That's not a function of how much you pay. The services and facilities definitely are, but how much you pay is not necessarily correlated with how you're treated. And I think if all of our people do have to stay in hotels when they come here, and when they stay in one, if they're treated really well, they feel good and they're welcome, particularly if they have an extended stay, or they have to come back. They have to come back on a regular basis. Maybe they come in something simple as annual physical, or maybe they have to come back for annual checkups for breast cancer, or whatever it is you're calling them back for. If they feel like this is a home, and it may not be a holy experience, but it at least is a home away from home. And if we can create that kind of feeling in our hospitality, and I think that's really important. And it does influence the people I've talked to. It does influence how you feel about staying here.
Yeah, no, thank you, and that's how I really do value. It's not the fact that she wanted to pay more, she just needed to be treated well, and that was what she wanted. And that's what anyone would want during their experience, even within the walls of the clinic, and that's what we aim for, and that's what we value, that we're able to do, and I think that's the same duplication of what we want to see translate into that seamless experience in the community. You're right.
If I could
Yeah,
just
please, sir.
underscore and emphasize a point that Dr. Peruthi made that I think gets to your point, Mr. George, and that is we're creating bidirectional communication. A patient is in the hotel and says, gosh, that doctor was really rude. We get that information back, and vice versa. Somebody has a bad experience in a hotel, we provide that information back to the hotel or the restaurant. And this idea of certifying hotels and restaurants that meet the criteria that are established, mutually agreed upon criteria with the hotel and dining community, I think will really set the standard for Rochester.
Great idea. That's what I was going to touch on, is this Certified Tourism Ambassador Program shows that we're out there in front of it and trying to raise the level of everyone that has patient contact, from the taxi cab drivers to the front desk people, all the way through. So it shows that we care. You talk about everyone wants to come to the Peace Plaza and the country, but show the kind of city we are. I think if we're showing the kind of city and medical complex we are by how much we care and how much effort we're putting into this, and I think it's going to, it certainly gives us a good direction, and I think it's a great step. So.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, if I could just,
Yes,
one
please.
comment on that, I think just to be able to, the hospitality, so Mayo Clinic is very excited to continue to raise that experience. The hospitality sector is just the same. And so I think that's also really important, the key partnership, and when they actually brought up to raise these standards themselves, and they set those standards themselves. So I think, and they've coming up with stories and ideas to make this seamless experience because they're hearing them, which is the importance for that bilateral. So I think that's also a really key component, which is a great win and shows the collaboration of our city is because of all these key industry sectors working together and really stepping up to do, ultimately, to create the best stories at the end of the day.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor Brady?
I just want to say thank you so much for really a terrific report. Some of you know that in my previous life, when I worked at Mayo and Methodist Hospital before the formal merger, I established a customer service program at Methodist, and then when I was in the finance department at Mayo, we brought a real dynamic program there. So, but when I used to go to conferences in Philadelphia, Chicago, Orlando, customer service, I always came back saying, the rest of them want to get the way we are, and we just need to keep ourselves ahead. What you're talking about now is really exciting. I might want to come and visit you every once in a while, if I could, Doctor.
You're always welcome, Mayor Brady.
Thank you very much.
Mayor Ryback?
I want to pick up on Bill's point about it's not only what the physical place is, it's how you're treated, if I'm paraphrasing you right, Bill. And, having stayed in different hotels in Rochester, I can say that bluntly, the experience is mixed on that. Some are absolutely about that and some are not. And I think, that's something that we need to address. But the one thing that comes out of this that's important to remember is when you see that brand, when they touch the Mayo brand, that automatically works. So we have to have all those things working together. But the one thing we're totally in control of is the fact that we can extend that Mayo brand into different ways. You use the illustration of somebody checking in at night and the clinic's not open and all of that. That does seem to me to be one of those things that's not that hard to fix. It's a somewhat expensive fix, but the idea that I could check into Rochester and check into the clinic, why isn't that person being somehow embraced by the Mayo brand at that time? When I land at the airport, that's the same thing. I mean, if I think about being in a very, very worried about my medical condition and all that, all I have to do is figure out how to get in the airplane, and once I land at Minneapolis, St. Paul, it's cool, because Mayo's got it. How Mayo's got it translates and seamlessly as something different. But I do think there's something, as much as I've tried to articulate so many different ways to make sure that the city and Mayo were collaborative, but we didn't like overstep into the city part of it. This may be a point where we extend the Mayo brand more into the visitor experience in the city and look at ways that that's part of it. I think that's one way to get that consistency. That means a lot of things, but I just want to hold that up. Two other just really quick points that popped up. One was the issue of parking, when asked about parking. Clearly, and I've certainly experienced this a lot with cities where people want to drive up to the front door. But when somebody goes to Disney World, they don't necessarily say, gee, I want to drive up to the front door of Pirates of the Caribbean. They arrive there and their experience of movement is coordinated and innovative and all of that. So I think sometimes we ought to find people's knowledge and ask them what they think about the options they know about now. But it does reinforce to me that we have to get out of the box on all of it. Those 2 points that I just made have me thinking that as much as a lot of us take our experience from cities and other places, I don't think we're using our brains enough on taking the experience of places where a single institution dominates an experience. I think we should be looking more at college towns. I think we should be looking at Disney, and I think we should be borrowing from that because that's more of a corollary. When we went to Cleveland to visit, Cleveland is stunningly making stunning progress, I think, as a city. They got a long way to go, but they've made a lot of progress. And there's a lot of that we can do, and we happen to have a city that's far greater than Cleveland will ever be, just a little north of here. So that's fine. But I think we also need to figure out what is that Disney-esque experience, what is that experience when I'm visiting my kids' college choices that somehow makes Palo Alto feel like Stanford and Stanford feel like Palo, So I just think we ought to challenge ourselves to take all of this and put it up against not a city, but a integrated experience.
Mayor Roebuck, your final comment about Disney was really very powerful. When we first came out of the chute with DMC in terms of our study, we actually went to Disney in California purposefully because they had to integrate with the community rather than in Florida. And they brought their Imagineering group from all over the world to visit with us. And they did that because they couldn't figure out why we wanted to talk to them. They didn't get the healthcare and patient part. And when we started talking about the experience, this aha moment for them happened as well to say, we're doing the same thing here. We just call our visitors something different. And we learned a lot from them. They also sent one of their executives to Mayo so they could actually experience what we were talking about when we talk about the experience. And he was amazed. I could actually share one of his response emails about the experience he had, and then he got it. He said, but I understand now what you're talking about outside the walls of Mayo. Yeah. So it was really quite powerful to look at other industries as well. You're exactly right. We should keep doing that.
Madam Chair, final point. Seeing all of this, another collected impression I have from all of that, especially that 25% pediatric number, and obviously the others, adult patients have kids too. I think we've been thinking a lot about how to attract millennials and all of that. I think that's critically important for workforce and many other things. But I think as far as our discussions go and reflection, I think we're sort of underthinking the issue of family attractions that help the visitors coming and the existing families here. And I just want to kind of flag that as something to think about.
Great. Any other comments, colleagues? All right. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Excellent job. Okay. Now we're going to have our EDA colleagues stay here and give us your update.
Madam Chair and board members, I'll be very brief. Just commenting on our last EDA board meeting, covered a number of topics. I'll just focus on a few. One, the board is really pleased with the staffing and the knowledge transfer that's occurring between HAMIS and the staff, and we feel they're up and running, so that's very good. We also reviewed the progress on Discovery Square, the feasibility study that we're conducting. We're making very good progress, particularly looking at a feasible, sustainable, organic growth of that property. And I think Lisa and I talked, we'd offer to bring an update to the November meeting, if that's okay with the board. But very good progress there. Also, we reviewed, and I think Lisa will talk a little bit more about this, but other private developer interests and activity. There's a tremendous pipeline of interest with a great variety of projects that will be very interesting, and the EDA board was very excited about that. I also noted that Mayo Clinic is working on its 5-year capital plan, and again, as we look at investments in Rochester, we feel, again, very confident that we will be hitting the target of $3.5 billion in investments, and we'll be taking plans to the board in November and February for approval of projects. So that would conclude my comments.
Thank you very much.
Good morning again, afternoon. I'll just cover the EDA sections in 4 sections. One, I'll start with the development update. As Jeff mentioned, we have created a joint development team with the city, and we're working very closely when if people are interested in sharing a project, to come forward to visit with both groups at the front end of the project. This is starting out very well. So far, we've had more than a dozen projects come through, and the interesting part about this is while not all of them are requesting particular DMC funding, every developer wants to be part of the DMC vision, wants to see where he or she can fit into the plan and how this could benefit everybody in terms of success. We're impressed with the range and diversity of the projects coming through. The projects are ranging from $4 million to $100 million. The project geography, so far the projects have come through in 5 of our 6 sub-district areas. So that's a diverse range there. The project types are everything from affordable and market rate housing, diverse hotel offerings, and mixed-use commercial and biotech interest, and developers locally and regionally. So I think that's very positive news in terms of the interest that we're starting to garner, and people are coming forward and bringing their projects forward for vetting. We created the process recently, and what we're going to do is have our first roundtable of developers and construction and builder groups to come forward and walk through the process with us to get input to see if we need to amend that as we start to move forward. This process, of course, will be amended as we go, but I think it'll be nice to get that voice on the front end now that we've completed the process. So it's been a great working relationship with the city on that front. We also are creating a developer's guide. So this guide is a one-stop shop for developers with hopefully all the information that they need in this packet, if you will, as they start to come forward with their projects. Working with the city on that front, that will be part of this roundtable input as well. So they'll be able to look at that project, or excuse me, that developer guide and say, is this what we needed, or what are you missing? So I think that will be helpful for us. DMC and the city are continuing to work on the capital improvement plan through 2019. We also have the transportation efforts moving forward. DMC EDA is at that table and working closely with the city as this transportation effort starts to move forward. Healthiest city in America. We're starting to do some landscaping, meaning what's going on around the locally, regionally, statewide, nationally, and internationally. It's a big deal. Health and wellness is big right now. People can capture components of that market. We believe that we should be able to capture that better than anybody else. So we're starting that discussion. I think in November we'll bring a high-level update for the board as well on that front. In terms of business and economic development activity, we're in early stages of developing long-term strategies and relationships with groups like DEED, Greater MSP, Life Science Alley. We want to leverage those existing relationships that they have with national and international and statewide colleagues, but also the relationships with those groups have with Mayo Clinic as well. So we're starting to work with all of these groups as we figure out how we can use our resources in a really wise way and leverage each other to bring this economic impact to the state of Minnesota. Mayor Ryback and I and Susan Ronnie also spent the last couple days together in Seattle. We participated in the St. Paul and Minneapolis Chamber of Commerce annual intercity leadership visit in Seattle. And I wanted to comment on one of the speakers at that visit. It was Mr. Sim, Ron Sim. He was the former executive director of King County and the deputy director of HUD. He said, related to healthcare and innovation, he said, the market that has the best opportunity to do this in the country is Minnesota. He also said that they've been trying very hard to get Mayo Clinic there because that would be their silver bullet. And then we quickly told them what we're doing. So, yeah, that was a really positive trip. I don't know, Mayor Ryback, if you wanted to comment on that, but I think it's really a wonderful networking opportunity we should continue to do.
I think, Madam Chair, it's so important to have connections from this operation into that. This is the thing where the Chambers of Commerce of Minneapolis-St. Paul send sort of a group of civic and business leaders to another city every year. And having you there, having Patrick there, and then Susan and I there I was there on my Generation Next work, but having us all there helped us weave this into a lot of the discussion. And I would say in the evolution of those trips over the past 3 years, there's been oh, isn't that nice, somebody from Rochester feeling
Right.
into this is a key part of our marketing for the metropolitan area. So just know that just as we're trying to create a whole destination here, there's a whole metropolitan area that's woken up to the fact that there's a lot that we can work together on.
I would agree. After we left, I'm guessing there wasn't one of the 90 people there that didn't know what DMC was.
Believe me.
That's very positive. Speaking of marketing, we're moving forward on our formal strategic marketing effort. We've got an RFQ in the field right now to start our marketing strategies for setting the stage for 2016. In terms of EDA operations, as Jeff mentioned, our staff are transitioning into their roles very nicely and very quickly. And I would say, again, as we start to canvass the community, region, and state, they're doing an excellent job of that and making some great progress. Our offices, if you haven't been there, please stop there. We are hoping to be connected and accessible to the community, and I believe we're doing just that. We're doing a ribbon cutting with the Chamber today. You're all more than welcome to attend that. It was fascinating to have Senator Senjum, whom you remember, just to remind you, he brought the group from Hafen City, Germany, the big development effort that's going on there. He went to visit that site. He brought those colleagues to Rochester, and we had an opportunity in the EDA to spend a good 2 hours just learning from them. The parallels were fascinating. I mean, they started their project in 2000, and they have $11 billion in the ground right now. In that short of time. So it was great learnings, a lot of parallels, quite a few differences, of course, but we learned a lot from them, and I think we need to continue to do that. Finally, I'll just comment on the communications, public relations, and community engagement efforts. We are continuing our regional efforts. That's very important that we keep that voice behind us, keep that support, keep those ambassadors across the state. So we're continuing to do that. The mayor, who just happened to step out, is working on that with us to make sure that we've got city and DMC moving forward. Lieutenant Governor Smith will be attending some of those as well. And we're developing other partnerships like Minnesota Nice Ride. We've been working with that group, and they want to finally, they said after 3 years of messing around with that market, we're ready to have these conversations, and they feel like we are ready. So those conversations have started and have been great. We're working with Mayo's Office of Wellness on the Healthiest City in America concept, so they're part of our group that's starting to explore this. We're working with the Rochester Arts and Cultural Trust and the Collaborative on things like creating a master plan for public art right now, which I think is critical to the success of this and creating vibrancy for this community. And we're working with the Young Entrepreneur Group in Rochester. There's a Global Entrepreneur Week coming up that we are going to be part of. So we're participating with this group to capture that interest and figure out what will work for them. Then finally, we continue to capture media attention this month to the tune of 54 stories. That's my report. Any questions?
Any questions? Good, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our final item is the update from the City of Rochester. Welcome.
You're the best for last.
Madam Chair, members of the board, good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to provide an update once again. One of the advantages, perhaps, that I have being last is as I sat and listened to the presentations, hopefully I can weave in a couple of things with what we're doing at the city level with some of the things you've heard in the earlier presentations. With that said, I do have one update for you and one recent accomplishment that I'd like to share. First, the update is our comprehensive plan and where we're at with that. The plan, of course, is meant to guide our future growth, development of our city, land use and traffic, and all of the elements that are interwoven there. We're drawing on a number of historic plans as well as a number of current plans, whether it be the downtown master plan, bicycle plan, just a variety of things that are going on. What's been really interesting in the exercise is we're soliciting community input extensively, and to date, we've received over 5,000 points of community input that we've gathered through interviews, surveys, workshops, and things of that nature, and that's an ongoing effort. Our goal, of course, is to ensure prudent and responsible use of public infrastructure, resources, and the like. We're gathering a great deal of information at this point. We are projecting trends and some scenarios now that we'll work with and test to see how applicable they are to our future. Some of the trending data is kind of interesting. By the year 2040, we could expect a population in Rochester in excess of 165,000 people. We could expect to see 50,000 additional new jobs, and we could expect to see in excess of 23,000 new housing units. So that's a fairly daunting challenge, and but we're up for it. Where we're at from a timetable standpoint, we are reviewing and we'll create a first draft of that plan by the fall and winter of this year, and that will be up for public review. And then our goal is to have the final plan ready for public review and adoption by first quarter of 2016. So we're moving along. One comment I wanted to insert based on housing. We're not standing still there either. Just interestingly, we saw some statistics, and Councilmember Ruska mentioned one of those. Just in the last year or so, a couple of years, we've added in excess of 1,000 hotel rooms to our inventory, and our Convention Visitors Bureau staff tell us that we're remaining constant, that the demand still seems to be there. So even though that seems like a lot, we're continuing to make use of it. As Mr. Ruska said, 760 apartments that we've added. But maybe most important relative to the affordable housing, I would point out that over the last 15 years, the city has participated in financing over 1,500 affordable housing units. And in addition to that, another 500 housing units from a rehabilitation standpoint. And we use the tools that we have available to us, revenue bonds, community block grants, and tax increment financing. So while we still have a long way to go, we feel like we've been contributing and have for quite some time. The last item that I'll talk about is a recent accomplishment, which was kind of exciting, and it's too bad Mayor Brady had to leave. He was very excited about this as well, and it's really a new housing unit that you may have read about. And it was an example where we had state and local legislators that came together and actually made changes in the law that allowed us to create a medical stay dwelling unit. And it was pretty exciting for us. That's a unique form of housing that we use in our community, and that's for those patients that prefer more of a home-like setting. They're here probably for an extended period of time with family members. We just heard that patients seeking proton beam therapy are here 2 to 12 weeks with 2 to 4 family members, and they prefer a more relaxed setting, and it needs to be affordable. One of the entities that currently offers this service in town, they're offering apartments up through and including 3-bedroom homes at a cost in the neighborhood of $55 to $85 a night. Sure. So it has to be something that really is conducive to the overall care that our visitors receive. The issue was that previously these entities could only advertise as a rental unit, not as a, quote, lodging unit. So that required some very precise language changes in law. And then the City Council just recently enacted the commensurate changes in our ordinance to permit these sorts of housing. So as I mentioned, we've already have a facility that's been in town for some time. They have 18 units, but the issue was our visitors could not find them because they couldn't advertise appropriately. So now we've set up medical stay dwelling units. They are appropriately inspected by county and public health staff. They're very safe, and so we're very excited about that as we look to continue to offer diverse housing options for visitors as well as those that choose to live here. And then one final comment on behalf of Mayor Brady. I know he's chairing the Chateau Theater Group. That group continues to meet, although and a lot of exciting ideas that they're continuing to work with. But we're not sitting idle either. We're with the blessing of the current owner, we do use the facility. Just recently, the Civic Theater held a gala, black tie gala, using the theater, and it was a sold-out event. So it was very much in use. The actual completing the sale of the building has now been extended a little bit, probably to the end of the year or just after, at the request of the current owner. She's just trying to get some financial arrangements in order. So nothing to worry about. It's just more the business process. In the meantime, we continue to have the use of the building selectively, and we're avoiding some expense, of course, some utility expense, so that's it's not hurting our bottom line at all either. So with that, I'll stop and ask if there are any questions.
Are there any questions for the city? Seeing none, thank you very much, Council
right,
President.
thank you.
Appreciate it. Last item on the agenda, our next regularly scheduled meeting will be Thursday, November 19th, 2015 at 9:30. Unless there are any other questions or comments from the board, I'm ready for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
We stand adjourned. Thank you.
You want me to tell you?